Welcome to In the Open with Luke and Joe. I'm your host, Luke Schantz, and here's my co-host, Joe Sepi. And a big welcome to our special guest, Leon Katsnelson. Before we get to our show, don't forget to like and subscribe. In this episode of In the Open, we bring you a conversation with Leon Katsnelson, Director and CTO of the IBM Developer Skills Network. The Skills Network is a community of top-notch content creators, authors, and educators. We will be discussing how this innovative community program is teaching practical development skills without having to set up complicated development environments. Before we welcome our guest, let's say hello to our co-host, Joe Sepi.
Hey, Luke. How are you, my friend?
Good. How are you doing, Joe? Let me ask you, how's the weather over there?
You beat me to it. As you probably know, because you're not that far from me, it has been gorgeous lately. 77 degrees right now, out walking the dogs in a t-shirt. I'm very happy about it.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting, right? Like from last week to this week, it was like the buds to like we got leaves, and it went from like full weight sweatshirt to t-shirt. It's really spring has sprung.
Yeah, and I'll be honest with you, I have a lot of spring coats that I love to wear. They're light jackets. But really, spring goes so fast. I mean, I almost feel like we're already in summer here, that it kind of frustrates me a little bit because I'd like to wear those coats. But you know, whatever. It's all good.
It's rough. I'm really sorry for you about it. I feel bad about that.
Yeah.
Before we welcome our guest, Leon Katsnelson, I just want to mention if anybody has any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. We'll be monitoring it during the show. And if something comes up or you happen to be watching this on replay, feel free to, you could DM us on Twitter or LinkedIn, and we'd be happy to follow up. And without further ado, let's welcome our guest, Leon Katsnelson.
Hey, Leon.
Hello. Welcome.
Hi, everyone. How are you guys doing?
Good. How are you? How's the weather where you're at? Where are you located, Leon?
I am in the beautiful Toronto, Ontario, Canada. And
Nice.
We're having an unseasonable weather, which is kind of like our prize for having the spring canceled. We had a lousy spring. I think we had like snow 3 weeks ago, like a full on snow storm. And today I think it's 26 degrees. I don't know what it is in Fahrenheit, but it's warm. It's definitely time to crank up the air conditioner, which I don't remember what it looks like. Yeah. So,
Yeah, I know.
So awesome.
Yeah, my dog, it was even warmer like a day or so ago, and my dog came over and was like, you got to turn on the air conditioning. I'm wearing a fur coat here. Come on, buddy. So I feel you.
Yeah. It's but summer's here. I'm happy about it. We had
Me
enough.
too.
We have enough of winter.
Yeah, tell me about it. I opened the pool and there was still snow on the ground. Luckily, that's gone.
Well, as long as you don't do any diving in that pool during the winter time, you're okay.
Yeah.
So before we dig into the Skills Network, maybe we could start off with just a brief self-introduction, Leon. Let the audience know who you are and where you're coming from.
Wow, brief self-introduction. I'm a dinosaur, so nothing. It takes you have to tell the whole history of the world when it describes. So I've been with IBM for too many years to mention, about 37. Actually, moving on to 38, and I got hired right out of university, but I actually already had a business. At that time, it was a family business, but I decided that career with the leading IT technology vendor was in the cards for me, as opposed to building furniture and stuff. And so it's been really great. I've done pretty much every job there is to do, from testing and QA, development, product management. Management, executive, and everything in between. I have not done a janitorial task at IBM, but I've done that before when I was an immigrant.
And I'm sure at home there's tasks.
Yeah.
We are all janitors at home.
Janitorial tasks are really high on my agenda. Yes. Yeah, so I tell my kids that when I came to Canada, I was about 18 years old, and in my first year in Canada, I did 9 different jobs. So anything from making jewelry to being a darkroom technician for a photo lab to cleaning up in bars and restaurants. Toilet washing is a big deal. I was a dishwasher. What else did I do? I did stuff. It prepared me well for the career in technology. That's all I can say.
Can I ask where you came from before arriving to Toronto?
This is when I have to bow my head in shame. I'm from the Soviet Union, the former Soviet Union.
Yeah, yeah.
And yeah, so I grew up in a city called Minsk, which is the capital of Belarus. Yeah, so
that's fascinating. Fascinating. Yeah, I know. The world's a mess, but the people. It's the people that count.
Exactly. Yeah, lots of great people.
Yeah.
Not so much about the leaders.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, you've been at IBM a long time, which is amazing to me. I have been at IBM for about 5 or 6 years, and live near headquarters. And you can't throw a stick without hitting an IBMer. And I've met retired IBMers and people who've been there for 40 years and all this amazing stuff. I love the long history of IBM. So maybe if you can give us a little bit of the arc of your time at IBM.
Yeah, so when I joined IBM, I joined into a really interesting project. It was called Special Bids. We were doing projects for primarily U.S. government, and primarily, Department of Defense. Nothing secret, with my heavy Russian accent, I would not have been anywhere near any of the secret stuff. But I learned a lot. It was a great job. I traveled a lot. And as a young guy, travel is one of the benefits of the job. It kind of changes later on. It becomes the detriment to enjoying the job. But at that time it was great. We had a close-knit team, and then we were working with all of the latest technologies. This is going back to 1985. I was working on Linux on the mainframe, which was which was a swear word if you pronounced it too loudly. No such thing as, it wasn't Linux at that time, it was Unix. But it was now we have Linux as part of System Z, and it's a sort of a star of that system. When we talk about the mainframe transformation and rejuvenation. But at that time it was pretty, you couldn't say it out loud. Let's put it this way. So I worked on a lot on office systems. I worked on manufacturing floor automation systems, which is something completely different. That's something we don't do very often, but that's just basically controlling robots and programmable logic controllers. Things that make other things work. So that was pretty cool. I spent about 20 plus years in the database world. So I worked on DB2 in all sorts of different areas of DB2. But the one I spent the most time was connectivity to the mainframe. And then I switched completely. And that product alone is a $1 billion product. It's still kicking, alive and kicking, which I always thought it would be done by now. But it's still there, still people buying it. I keep joking that people still call me about it. I keep joking that on my tombstone is going to say, "Here lies Leon Katsnelson, the DB2 Connect guy." And then I spent quite a bit of time working on a front end, the programming interfaces to DB2. And we did a lot of things that were uncommon in IBM. So, for example, we created a complete Microsoft Visual Studio set of tools for working with DB2 databases. And then we decided to do something completely bonkers. and put in Ruby on Rails in front of DB2. And we were the first commercial database to have a Ruby on Rails interface. And Ruby on Rails community at that time was about 90 people.
Oh, wow. It's early days. I remember, when Rails was really hot and everybody was like, "Oh, we gotta be doing Rails." So I know.
Yeah, I would show up at the Rails conferences, and this was the most eclectic collection of people you could ever meet. Yeah, it was just surreal. So it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. When you're dealing with people whose name is Why the Lucky Stiff, and you ask why do people call you that, he would never tell.
That's funny. I worked at Sears when Rails was exploding, and it was a total Java application that we were building. But once Rails got hot, it was like, okay, this new section, we're going to build it in JRuby on Rails. So,
yeah. Actually, at the Rails conferences, the Ruby conferences, every speaker would get up on the podium, and everybody did live coding, of course. But the first slide was always, I used to do Java, and I don't do Java anymore. It was like a Alcoholics Anonymous recovery session.
I love it.
So it was kind of interesting, and people will look at me kind of funny, like, a guy from IBM. What the heck are you doing in here?
Yep.
Trying to be one of you people. Yeah, so did a lot of that, and then I switched to something completely different. I switched to doing some emerging technology stuff, also in the data and AI database area. And one thing I discovered while doing that is that there was a bit of a impedance mismatch when we talked to folks about emerging technologies and traditional relational databases. So we started doing a lot of, let me kind of give you a bit of a background. Let me teach you something. So we started doing some tutorials, not full-on courses, but a lot of things, kind of trying to bridge the gap between developers and database administrators. And these are two completely different audiences. Developers and database administrators, they're usually at each other's throats, because one is trying to move fast, and the other one is trying to impose structure, and sometimes these things don't align. So this was interesting. So trying to do a bit of education on both sides, trying to tell developers why schemas and databases are kind of important, and why those database administrators really want you to do schema on write as opposed to schema on read. And why they're not so big on this, JSON stuff and MongoDB and like this data, because they don't control the schema, but their job is to control the schema, and so it's interesting, the different perceptions in the same IT space. So out of that came, and then we were introducing big data. IBM was really getting big into big data, and my general manager, who's now CEO of IBM, but when he was general manager at the time, Arvind said that he turned out to our education department and said, we're introducing a Hadoop product, and I want you to get me 1,000 people educated in this product by the end of the year.
Wow.
So said, okay. Well, I was a product manager at the time, or I was managing product managers. So this was the goal for the education team, and they went ahead and they did the usual education approach to this. Created a number of courses, offered them to our customers, and 3 months later, this thing was August. We introduced the product in May. 3 months later, they said, well, we have 4 people educated. And by the way, they're all from the same company. So I thought this was not going to work. So I, even though education was not my gig, I told my manager, I said, look, I'm going to do something, just cover my back. So we went and created something we call Big Data University. It was an online portal and an online destination for learning. And we took all IBM stuff out of it. And we put everything about Hadoop. As a matter of fact, it was pretty much the same material, but we just oriented towards like people who didn't know much about IBM product or IBM in general. And within about 4 weeks, we had 5,000 people. So I was like 5x of what the goal was of educated. So obviously something worked right. So when Arvind heard that, he said, well, you know, we have this big conference coming up in October. And since you got 5,000, let's make sure you get 10,000 by the time this conference comes up. The way executives come up with numbers is usually a factor of multiplication of 10 or 100 or 1,000. Because I'm convinced, I'm an executive myself, and I'm convinced they don't know how to multiply any other numbers.
Yeah.
So yeah, we actually did this. We, you know, I don't know how, but we did it. We got about 12,000, and it was only a couple of extra weeks in there. So that was a big deal. And then he said, well, if you got 12,000, surely you can get to 100,000. Well, now you're setting the goals pretty high, okay? But he said, we'll give you a hand, okay? And then, you know, we're sponsoring something called ICPC, which is an intercollegiate programming contest. I still remember that. So big deal. You know, students from all over the world compete. Pretty cool stuff. I mean, I really loved it. And we were going to do something with them, but it just was taking a little bit too much time. And, you know, we would kind of miss a year because we were not in the right cycle. To make a long story short, we did a lot more than 100,000. We actually now have 7.5 million registered learners, and we're teaching people a lot more than just Hadoop. We do everything. We do cloud native development, containers, lots and lots of stuff on data engineering, lots of stuff on data and science, which is kind of like our biggest area is data science and artificial intelligence. Blockchain, you name it. Basically, our message to people is whatever you want to learn, we want to help you learn it. So that's kind of what we do. So that's how about that for a very long explanation of my background?
No, it was great. It's interesting too. You know, I started doing advocacy at IBM. I mean, that's what I was hired for like 5 or 6 years ago. But you know, as we sort of coalesced the whole advocacy team into one group, I became aware of Skills Network. But I didn't realize it sounds like it's been around for a few years, huh?
Yeah, we kicked that off way back in 2011,
Wow.
but it evolved over time. It was completely different at that time.
Yep.
You know, when we first just created a website, and that was that for a long time. And that website still exists. It's now not called Big Data University. It's called cognitiveclass.ai. Anybody can come in, pick a course. There's nothing to pay. Learn whatever you find useful. You get a certificate of completion. Sometimes you even get a badge, and so on. And just it's basically, we call it at your pace, at your place. And you know, this is what we call independent, a destination for independent learners. So somebody who doesn't have like a professor or a boss or, you know, your mom nagging you to go learn something. It's just something you want to go learn. And it's not the same thing as going and learning something on YouTube, YouTube is great. I learn everything on YouTube, but it's pretty passive learning, right? You kind of watch somebody doing something. This is all hands-on. So we provide, you know, like a hands-on lab environment. So you don't spend time downloading, installing, fixing, tuning stuff. Yep. You just, you know, I call it our easy button, you know. You click on a start the lab button and just the whole environment that you need kind of rolls out in front of you with all the libraries and everything pre-installed, configured, and you do your stuff as opposed to, you know, learning how to Google something and download and install. So and yeah, so that used to be just a one website, but we kept a lot of our customers kept coming and saying, well, can you tell me what my employees are learning? I'd really like to know. And can you tell me what their progress is? I said, look, listen, love to do that, but there's two problems. Okay, one is that will be a violation of their privacy. It's a kind of big problem. Okay, and two, they don't even tell us who they work for because it's completely anonymous, right? I mean, the only we do collect you do register with your email, but that's just so we can provide technical support for that, and you put your name just so we can put it in a certificate, so it's not like Joe Blow, right? So yeah, so I said, well, you know what, we could stand up like a white labeled version of this thing for your company. And surprisingly enough, people said, I'd love that. So that's what the Skills Network is today. Skills Network today actually is not the cognitiveClass.ai. It's we have over 200 destination portals that are owned by our customers and partners that we create, and they manage it. They own it. They have the remote control in their hand. We don't tell them what to do or how to do it. We just give them a platform. We give them subscription to all of our content, and they take that content and create learning paths and learning journeys for their employees or for their students or whoever that's for. And then we kind of grew from that. We said, well, learning doesn't just happen in a classroom or a virtual classroom for that matter. A lot of people learn by participating in hackathons, competitions, and stuff like that. So we said, why don't we create a competition management system as part of these portals? And so competition management system was born. So now people can do, there's some really good competition management systems out there. Probably one of the most famous ones for data scientists is Kaggle, which is now owned by Google. But the problem is, Kaggle has a huge draw for people to come in. But if I'm a company and I want to create a competition or a hackathon where I crowdsource a solution for a real problem for my company, it's really difficult to do on Kaggle because it's public. So I have to give them a data set which is going to make sense. Well, that'd be violation of a lot of privacy and security rules if I give them something that's semi-real even. Mm-hmm. Okay, and the other part is if I give them a definition of a problem, then I'm disclosing to my competition what is it that keeps me up at night.
Yeah.
So so people like doing internal hackathons. So that's why we created the hackathon management system, and we've done a lot of things like that. So COVID came, everybody went online. So we created a virtual classroom, which is kind of like Zoom or WebEx or Meet or Teams, whatever. But it's just specific for education, and you don't have to pay anybody. So stuff like that. Event management system. So if you're running, like an event within a company, we organize that. So it kind of transitioned from just having courses to having courses and guided projects. It's all hands-on and it's all online, and then transition to like a more of a employee engagement stuff, and keep on transitioning.
Very interesting. And we haven't had any questions yet, but I just want to mention that some of our listeners, I might mispronounce this, I just looked it up, but Nivrahoho said she's inspired by this talk, and she actually did several of the badges on Cognitive Class.
All right.
Warren also said it's a great learning resource, so it sounds like he's checked it out. And we have another person who actually, it was part of their college curriculum was to do some of the courses on there. So it seems like your reputation precedes you with the Skills Network.
Well, happy to have that reputation. Thank you all who learned with us. It's it keeps the team going. We're a small team, but we're very dedicated to this democratization of hands-on skills.
Yeah, and I'm looking at the notes that we have too, and I see an interesting phrase, which I think you're kind of describing how why you would use this phrase, but intrapreneurship. I think that's kind of a fascinating concept.
Yeah. So I've always been a a very compliant type of individual. When I was a kid, I listened to my parents. I recommend everybody listen to your parents. Listen to my teachers. And then I started to ask questions. And when I joined IBM, I became a bit of a rebel.
Wild duck.
Well, yeah, wild duck. And it was pretty interesting. IBM in 1985 was a different company then, and a lot of people were telling me, here, young boy, you just don't understand. I said, well, I came from running a business. I think I understand something. And sure enough, a few years later, IBM was in a lot of trouble because apparently I did understand something. So ever since then, I've decided that, big companies need to behave like little companies, like small companies. If they are, the bigger the company, the more successful the company becomes, the more stable and the more settled in its way it becomes. And I believe progress is driven by the wild ducks. And a wild duck within the company is entrepreneur, somebody who takes a risk, somebody who does something that is not asked of him or her. I think it's the good part about being entrepreneur as opposed to entrepreneur is you're not always looking for funding, because you have the resources of the big company behind you. The bad part is you're not rewarded the same way if you succeed. You're never going to get 51% of Facebook or something like that, or 51% of IBM for that matter. So, but it's extremely rewarding. It's extremely interesting because I've always made my own job. I've been lucky enough to be able to make my own job, and if you can do that, that's the best gig in the world. I honestly think that.
Yeah, I agree, and I find maybe it's because IBM is such a big company, but maybe it's the wild duck aspect of it. But yeah, I've been able to find a good spot as well. You can find a good spot that fits well. It feels good. Cool. So I don't want to get off topic here, but I'm just curious. Can you? Because I've used the Skills Network over the years, and it's pretty powerful. Like really amazing what you can do from a browser and such. Can you just talk briefly about what's behind the scenes there?
Sure. Yeah. So as entrepreneur, I always focus on the why as opposed to what. Okay. So that my team knows this. Okay. It's my favorite word. So the why part. So I'll talk specifically about the labs. So first of all, why do we need to learn hands-on? Because that's the only way you can learn. Like a quick story. This winter, I wanted to learn how to kiteboard. So I watched like a 1,000 hours of kiteboarding videos on YouTube. And by the time I finished watching those videos, I was sure I could get a PhD in kiteboarding. Okay, I could teach people kiteboarding. And then I went to Costa Rica. I got on the beach. I got into the harness, and people kind of hooked me up by the kite to my harness. And this is when I realized, I know absolutely nothing about kiteboarding. Okay, so the point is, we were offering courses, okay, and these courses were good, but they're only so good because they only had instructional material. So we needed to make sure that people could learn to kiteboard by doing kiteboarding, or the people could learn programming by doing programming. So we needed people to do that. So of course, what do we do in those days? We say, well, go download this product, install it on your laptop, configure it, whatever. And we were teaching a lot of things like Hadoop. You don't want to install Hadoop on your laptop. You don't want to download it, okay? Because you're going to learn absolutely nothing except how to Google Hadoop, get the proper distribution. And it's just not a good experience. So we said, why don't we give people an environment where they can just go and do things right away? Just like I said, that easy button. Just click the button, and it's all there. No install, no configure, whatever. So we did that. And but when you have 2,500 people doing this at the same time, becomes a bit of a challenge, because if you're just provisioning a virtual machine for somebody, and that virtual machine costs you, let's say, $300 a month, you multiply this by 7.5 million people, that's a lot of millions of dollars. Okay, so that obviously wasn't going to work. So what, thankfully enough, this was the time when containers started to become sort of like interesting and important. So we said, what if we were to containerize this, and then we don't need to get like a virtual machine for everybody, even for a period of time, but we could just give them a container or a bunch of containers with their stuff running. So I said, okay, well, that's cool. Now, let's say, and we offer a number of tools that programmers use. So, for example, for data scientists, we offer them something called Jupyter Lab, something called RStudio. These are pretty big products on their own. Zeppelin environments. For general purpose programmers, like for regular programmers, who do Node.js or Java or whatever the programming, Python, whatever it is, we have something we call Cloud IDE, which is the same thing as a VS Code, a Visual Studio Code, only running in a browser. It even uses the same plugins. So we said, okay, well, what if we were to containerize all these tools? And we did. Okay, and then we create some kind of like a provisioning thing, okay, that when you click on the button, I want to do the lab, we'd get the right thing stood up for you, and we'd attach your storage to that right thing, okay? So you could do your exercises, do your project, and then go for lunch, come back, and it's still there. Or as a matter of fact, you can leave it for 2 weeks, come back, and it's still there, right? So this is how we started to do a lot of really sophisticated orchestration. And this was actually before Kubernetes time. So we found this really great product called Rancher. And Rancher had its own orchestrator. And we used that, and it was really successful with this. But then at the same time, what happened is Kubernetes started to really take off. And it just dwarfed Rancher and its small team, which, by the way, now is acquired by SUSE, and they switched to Kubernetes from their own orchestrator. And we said, okay, well, now we got to switch everything we do to this new thing, Kubernetes. And Kubernetes is not the most trivial of things to learn, to be honest. So we started to learn a lot of that, and we kind of gotten to be pretty good at it, because we run huge infrastructure on 4 continents, 6 different data centers. So we learned a lot. We said, well, if we learned it, we might as well teach the people. So we now have a lot of courses and projects, everything about Kubernetes and so on. And then IBM acquired OpenShift, which is kind of like a commercial offering for like a Kubernetes orchestrator. And we said, okay, well, maybe we'll give people an opportunity to learn Kubernetes in a raw, or Kubernetes as part of an OpenShift ecosystem. So we have multiple tools like that. So that's kind of how we build everything. So the way basically our basic motto is, we teach what we know, and we know what we do. Right. So we do everything. So my team is, they're programmers, obviously, but we will always program in something that is coming up. So we don't do any COBOL. As a matter of fact, we sad to say, but we don't even do any Java, because frankly, there are enough Java programmers in the world already. There's enough materials in it. So we always kind of on the bleeding edge. We always pick something that we believe is going to be the next big thing. Sometimes we're right. Actually, we've been pretty good at being right. Sometimes we're not so right. Okay, meaning like we're wrong. But yeah, it's served well So sometimes we just, my whole team was really big on Ruby on Rails. And sometimes I decided, I said, enough, you know too much of Ruby on Rails. Let's learn something. Let's do something in what we believe is going to be the next big thing. Because, frankly, Ruby on Rails is like, 15 years now. It's a very mature technology.
Yep.
So, outcome, Elixir and Phoenix. And, next thing we know, we're just elixiring and phoenixing all over the place. Not because we believe it's the best tool for what we do, but just because we need to be out there, pushing the boundaries, because that's the next thing people are going to learn.
Yeah, and I'll just add, just to kind of wrap up that section, is like I found it fascinating that I'm learning how to work with containers while using containers in a browser, and it was just like, this is impressive. This is really great.
Yeah, it's the best way.
Yeah,
I have to comment on Ruby. Joe and I had a colleague who was a Ruby developer, and we had another colleague who would always used to tease him about it. And there was like something where he'd be like, "It's only 2% of developers. It's only 2%." So whenever we see it, we always joke about this.
yeah, 2%.
You're not talking about Sam Ruby, are you?
Yeah.
No. Sam's great, though. I miss Sam.
He is. Well, Sam actually is the guy who helped us build the first Ruby driver for DB2.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. Yeah, Sam, he and I were on the same team together for a little bit. And for folks who don't know, Sam was a longtime IBMer. He was the president of the Apache Software Foundation, and has just done a lot over the years. Great person.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yep. The other comment I would like to make is it seems like you're perfectly situated for this role and to lead this team, because throughout when you explain to us sort of the arc of and trajectory of your career, you have learned so many things and tried so many different things and had so many different roles that, being a learner yourself, I imagine you have a lot of empathy for what it takes to learn, and you're able to put that into this program.
Yeah, I think I do. I think I do. And as a matter of fact, I believe that the best way to learn is by teaching somebody. So my team is 80% students. And when I interview them, they ask me, what am I going to be doing? I go, well, what do you like to do? Like, what's your favorite technology? And then they'll say something, like I like to do, I like to do IoT, or I like, I like JavaScript, Node.js, whatever it is. I'd say, okay, would you want to do some, teach people? And they go, oh, I'm not that good. I go, you're perfect, because my view is the best teacher is the student who is 2 chapters ahead in a book, and I mean it, because I find that if you've done something for too long and you know something from beginning to end, you lose the empathy. You kind of don't, you forget what is it that drove you nuts when you were first learning it. But if you were the one who just did the same thing and you're now sharing the experiences with somebody who's just following you right now, it's all fresh in your mind. And you say, well, this was really super useful for me, what I just did last week, or it's usually not last week, but I just did recently, and I learned this cool trick. Okay, and I want to teach everybody else that. So I think these students are actually excellent, and they've proven to be. So we have a new cohort of students just started last week, and we run a pretty short scheduled sprints. So we do sprint planning on Monday, and we do demos on Friday. And by the way, our sprint is a release. So everything we demo on Friday, it goes out. It's out in the wild. Wow. It's in production. So, I just saw 3 projects created today by these students who just joined us last week.
That's amazing. I'm blown away by that. And I agree, like, not only like a trick you learn, but like, for me, it's like the bumps in the road, or I took a left turn here and that's not the way to go. So it's fresh in my mind. I'll share, my learnings with you. That makes a lot of sense to me. I'm amazed that you're doing this with so many students. How long have you been doing that? That's really impressive.
A while. Yeah. So hiring full-time people is a big challenge, in any company, right?
Yeah.
Even the fast-growing companies. So when our audience is growing really fast. So we had to come up. This is part of the intrapreneurship. How do you create something that moves from 5,000, from 0 to 5,000 to 100,000 to 7.5 million, right? In how do you maintain it?
Yeah.
So I quickly found out that by going to my management and saying I need more people wasn't going to cut it. So I said, okay, well, what if I were to combine what we do with trying to get more people exposed to IBM and life at IBM and being an IBMer? So got into this student program which we run, which we hire interns typically after third year, and they come in and they're it's not a summer student program. It's a program they're with us for typically about 16 months. So they're full timers, full on, right? And they rise to the occasion. I've had fantastic results with that. So combining the recruitment program with what we need to do, and they by the way, they learn a lot more than just, if we hire people for like a short internships, it's very difficult for them to get to know enough to own a component, for example, or to really drive a major piece of work. But if they're here for 16 months, they do the same things that the full-timers do. And as a matter of fact, they usually ask me in the interview, say, so what do students on your team do? I go, the same thing that everybody else does, right? I mean, I said, you don't bring coffee, at first you're gonna kind of attach yourself to a developer or somebody like that. And we use Tuple a lot for pair programming, so that's really helpful. So and they get to mature and learn very quickly. And then that's kind of the way it worked for us.
That sense of ownership must be really fulfilling and motivating. I have to imagine that's amazing.
Yeah, you're spot on. So if you go to any of our courses, if you do any of our projects, you'll always find that there is a picture and a link to the author. And I insist on it. Believe it or not, people actually resist. I insist on it. I say, you did this, okay? It's your reputation. You're here with us to build your eminence. So I insist that they put the picture, and I insist that they put the links, usually to a LinkedIn. So when they graduate, they have something to show. It's not just like a meaningless resume. It is, and I, kind of one anecdote. I had one guy. He's a really great data scientist on my team, but he had a bit of an accent. He's Persian, so he had a bit of an accent, and he was kind of like really didn't want to have himself publicized too much. But I insisted. He left us and went to work on Amazon and now Google. He's a great guy and has got a great career. So he reached out to me not that long ago when he was coming to Google, and he said, "Leon, I can't thank you enough for making me put the link in the picture into my courses." He says, "I show up at Google the first day, I'm in a meeting, and I say introduce myself, and everybody in the room says, 'You don't have to introduce yourself. We all took your courses.'" So I said, mission accomplished, done.
Yeah.
Okay? It's really gratifying.
That is really remarkable, and again, I think it feels very core to IBM in some ways. I mean, I think this particular program's somewhat unique, but when I'm talking to people who have been at IBM for a long time, it's usually, oh yeah, I started right out of college, or I interned here, or, and I'm just blown away that, people spend 30, 40 years here, like right out of college. But it's stuff like that I think really, makes it happen, makes it worthwhile.
Yeah, absolutely. It's, I do get asked a lot, why did I stay that long? And my answer is always, I always found something exciting and interesting to do. And the most important part, every day I come to work, I learn something.
Mm-hmm.
Every day.
Yeah.
And you can't say that about every job. You cannot say this about every place. I consider myself to be very lucky to have had this opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. That's fantastic. You talked about some major growth. I know you've kind of touched on that in your story leading up to some of this stuff, but like, what's sort of the latest story about the growth that you're seeing?
Yeah, so there's growth in two areas. So first of all, we need to bring new. Okay, so we are a platform. We're a platform that connects learners to content. So from that point of view, we're not that different than Amazon Marketplace, which connects shoppers to producers, right? Same kind of thing. So what is really important for every platform? Well, for every platform, what's most important is a great deal of content. So it has two sides, the supply side and the demand side. So on the supply side, you want to have, we need to get a great deal of content. Why do we need a great deal of content? Because if our catalog is really rich and really deep, then a lot more people would want to have our portals deployed for their companies to educate their employees.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the more portals we deploy, the more interesting it becomes for content providers to put content on our platform. The more content we have on our platform, the more learners we can attract. And so the flywheel goes. I didn't invent this. This is actually it's called an Amazon flywheel. So the way they organize the platform is, if you create enough assortment and you lower the prices, you're going to get a lot more sellers on the marketplace. You get more sellers, that lowers down the prices and creates more assortment, which brings more people, and so the flywheel goes. So we are really ramping. Our flywheel is really starting to go to fly, so to speak. So it means that we are constrained right now. That's one of our biggest sort of constraints is how do we create more content, and how do we make that content that a lot of people want? So I'll start with the content that a lot of people want. So we look around and say, a lot of people think that I look inside of IBM and ask IBMers, what do you think people should learn? We never do that, because we believe that's going to pollute our perception of what the real people want to learn. So we don't look inside of IBM. We look outside and say, what are people interested? What are people searching for? What kind of courses they want to take? What kind of projects they want to do? So AI is super hot, okay? But not AI the way we thought of AI a few years ago, where it was more like a curiosity, like, how does this thing work? No, right now it's all about applied AI. How do I take my app that I'm building and how do I make it smart? Okay, how do I infuse AI into everything? So we do have a lot of basic AI courses, basic data science courses, but we are doing more and more of applied AI. How do I not basically less of how the sausage is made and more of how to kind of apply it. So that's one area. Obviously, blockchain started off with a bang, but it was more of a curiosity. What's happening is it's past the hype on the hype curve. It's now in a sort of what seems to be like a low point, but it's now actually being used for something very productive. And specifically, one area that we find that is getting a lot of traction besides cryptocurrency is in self-sovereign identity. And we don't see it as a blockchain oftentimes, but we've seen vaccine passports. Well, a lot of these vaccine passports are actually based on blockchain. Or at least some of them are. Okay, let's just kind of give you an idea. So that's the way we look at this. We say, how do we transform a curiosity into something that's tangible, something that's applicable? Right now, I would say one of the big things that people are very interested in, of course, is quantum. Do we know how to apply quantum to something practical? Not yet. So right now we're in a curiosity stage, and the materials we do for that are more curiosity. The other thing that people are very interested in is metaverse. For no other reason, maybe that Zuckerberg said that he's going to pump 180 billion dollars into the space. You have to take notice of that. But it's got a lot of really different facets to it. So, for example, one of the facets is Web3. The other facet is AR, VR, and the third facet of that is this self-sovereign identity. So we're my whole team has AR, VR headsets, Quest 2, and we're trying to figure out what will people want to do with it, not like play games and swing sabers or whatever, but like does it have some other applications besides that? How will people get their unique identity represented in the space? How does that relate to Web3 and so on? So we're developing that, okay, and like really trying to feel, together with our partners, really trying to feel out where this is going and what would be required in terms of the learning materials. But then somebody has to create all of that content, and we have a small team, and of course we draw on guys like you to help us out and the broader IBM. But it's a drop in a bucket. So what our goal today is to we want to become like a YouTube of technical content. So self-publishing. If you look back 10, 15 years ago, the only people who would be publishing videos would be TV studios and movie studios. Heck, the only people who would be doing radio broadcasts would be radio stations. And look at us now. You got a microphone, you got a telephone, a smartphone, turn it around. All of a sudden, you're a content creator. Well, there's a lot of people. You go on Stack Overflow, you go on Quora, you go on all these places. There's a lot of people helping other people learn or get to understand and do stuff. Can we turn them all into content creators for this technology content? Now, we can't offer them money necessarily. Sometimes we can, but most of the time we can't offer money. But we can offer fame. What I mean by that is we can bring that material, those materials they create, we can bring them into IBM's best customers, because those portals I was talking about, that's where they get deployed. Mm-hmm. So now employees of the world's largest corporations and organizations are learning from the material that somebody is creating, and we're enabling that process. Mm-hmm. So when people ask me what is Skills Network, I say it's a supply chain for content. That's kind of the way we see ourselves. Now we have to prime that supply chain with our own content, and we'll continue to do that. But that's what we're looking to do. We're looking to kind of open up the aperture and invite everybody. As a matter of fact, the URL you have on the screen, one of the first calls to actions in there says become an author. We invite everybody to say, hey, like you know something, teach others. But to do that, we had to make it easy, because putting courses together is not easy. It's a pretty lengthy undertaking. It takes months. It's a lot of investment of time. Most people can't put that much investment into it. So we created this thing we call guided projects, which is basically the best way to think of this as a tutorial with all the tools baked in. So you don't have to download anything, you don't have to install anything. Most of the time is you're looking at instructions on the left side of the screen to tell you exactly what to do. And on the right-hand side of the screen is the place where you do it. So, for example, it could be an IDE, and we provide all of that. And it becomes very easy. The instructions are created in Markdown, and we have like editors and helpers and whatever to create that. So anybody, it's almost as easy as writing a blog post. You come in, you write it out, and you create this environment for them, and you publish it, and then we take care of the distribution. That's our sort of like the business model in a nutshell.
It's amazing.
It really is so interesting. I love too how you brought up the hype cycle. I love looking for those whenever I can get a hold of those reports, like a Gartner report that has these hype cycles. I love digesting it. And like you mentioned, right, there's this, what is it, like the peak of inflated expectations, like the hype, and then you have that trough of disillusionment going into that plateau of productivity. So all these folks, especially like now, there's all this tumultuous stuff going on with crypto and metaverse. And, right now we're probably at the peak hype of metaverse and all of these problems and things that don't work and so, quote unquote failures in that space. It's actually, that's where we learn and we hit the bottom. So, all these folks, don't feel like you're missing out, right? Like now is the time, like the time's in a little bit in the future and you learn from it now. Because I think back about, it's kind of amazing, right? Second Life, however many years ago, 15 years ago, it was the metaverse. It had the Linden dollar. It had it had all the things. It was just a little too early in the curve. It was bleeding edge. And now, obviously Facebook switching to Meta and Zuckerberg promising all this money, but then the floodgates open. You've got all these other, metaverses opening up and you've got all these brands buying in. Like I'm taking an MBA course and, one of my colleagues is a trainer for Fidelity, and he's telling me how they just put in like an educational, facility in one of the metaverses. So it's so interesting how it's like the ideas were there, but it needed to kind of catch up, right?
Yeah, I get on my Apple Watch notifications every time somebody buys some land property in the metaverse. So it's been kind of like buzzing nonstop. I don't quite understand it yet, but it's fascinating. It's just, I guess it's the same thing that people used to do buying up domain names, right?
Yeah.
So the real estate and metaverse is going really fast.
We got a question. It says, as an IBM business partner, how should we leverage these courses? This is from Mark Ironside.
Yeah. So it depends what kind of business partner you are. We have a lot of partners, but 40 plus, which are educational providers, and they take our courses from our catalog and they teach their audiences, and they charge money for that, right? That's their business. So they add value. Even though they take our content, they add local value. So maybe, for example, they may be training people in person, or they're changing the exercises to fit the industry or to fit the geography, or they're translating them into a local language or whatever. So that's one way. We have a lot of, and not a lot, but a number of ISVs. Lightband is a good example. So Lightband, they do some really interesting